Hey YouTube fans, Eric Hayden here in the garden. Pretty cold in Eastern North Carolina. Got my hoodie on, temperatures in the 50s for highs today. You northerners are probably laughing at that, but in the middle part of January, our highs are usually in the low to mid 50s. So this is kind of a winter-like day here for late November for us. We did have some patchy frost about 10 days ago. However, we have not had a hard freeze yet. Tonight it's going to be a close call. We'll probably be well into the low 30s and upper 20s inland, but we live about 3 miles from the ocean, so that water keeps us warmer. Our forecast is in the mid 30s, probably a frost, but unless we get a hard freeze tonight, we may have blooms into December. The reason for that, once we get by tonight, first part of tomorrow morning, we're going to be quite warm through Thanksgiving Day, and that goes for a lot of us here along the East Coast. Things warm up over the next 2 weeks. So if we get through tonight, you're going to be seeing some blooms here right into December from the garden. Speaking of blooms, traditionally, whether you're in the South, the North, the Midwest, your best color and your best blooms are in the fall and spring. And we mentioned this on prior videos. The reason for that, and you just can't beat this, I'm staring at it through the camera and it still looks quite impressive. This is Claire Elise, a rose by John Smith. But back to the point about spring and fall, you have cooler days, cooler nights, so those vibrant colors really come out. Here in the summertime, we get quite warm. We are up into the upper 80s and low 90s and quite humid, so we have a lot of disease and insect issues. And the sun is just beating down on it. Think about how you feel when you go outside in the summertime. You're not at your optimum performance for sure. This is Claire Elise. We mentioned on a prior video, in addition to blooms looking better in the fall and spring, and again, that's when rose shows typically are. Of course, not this year, but that's when they usually occur. The other factor with that is you have these vibrant colors that show up because you don't have the sun really beating down on them. But the other video I mentioned that some roses tend to do better in the spring, some tend to do better in the fall, and others do well at both seasons. I have not grown Claire Elise a long time. If you grow Claire Elise, I'd be interested in your comments. But from what I've seen, it looked good in the spring, but boy, it looks really good in the fall. I mentioned one of my other roses, Hot Princess, tremendous spring bloomer for me. It has blooms, we'll show you that in a second, but it doesn't look nearly as good as it did in the spring. But again, roses can be tricky to grow. Yes, you have to spray, especially if you grow hybrid teas. But look at that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 good looking blooms. Here's 10, 11, 12, 13, and I mean ones that are not spent already. I'm counting just the good ones. So you have a dozen roses for your significant other, your neighbor, whoever, off of that one bush. So really, really looking outstanding. So I want to show you a couple other roses in case we get a hard freeze tonight. A hard freeze, if you're a new rose grower, it won't kill these roses. It'll zap the blooms and they'll be gone. But this is a perennial. It's a bush that's going to come back. So the leaves will still be green. For us, a lot of times through the winter, up north, you'll lose the leaves. You may get some dieback of the cane in the bush, but it'll grow again next year. So when I mean a hard freeze tonight, I just mean that it might be the end of the blooming season this year, but it'll certainly come back next year once we warm up. So that's why I'm showing you these blooms. Again, does it get better than that? That's Marilyn Monroe. I haven't touched this rose. I haven't covered it up. You'll notice these pink speckles. That's just from the morning dew or the rain. Some lighter blooms, that happens to it when it gets a little rain on it. Double Delight is pretty much past its peak or its last flush of the season. This is Dolly Parton, very, very nice rose, big orange rose. This bloom is a little smaller this go around than it can be even larger than this. But you can tell from the proximity to my hand that it's still a pretty big bloom. I say it's a little smaller because those Claire Elises were actually bigger than the Dolly Parton on that bush right now. Some of these roses in this bed with the railroad ties, they're the most established. They were planted in spring of 2017, so they're over 3 years old. And you can see they're quite tall. They're all on Fortuniana, and the background is Let Freedom Ring, and then the sport of that is Zach Noble's. So it's Let Freedom Ring in form and growth, but it's got more of an orangish color to it. Very, very nice bloom. And again, These haven't been protected. A lot of these we had about over 4 inches of rain last week, so they were kind of beaten down by the rain as well. And right next to Zach is not the parent, but the rose it sported from, which is Let Freedom Ring. One interesting thing, I don't know if you can tell in the sunlight or not, notice all my roses are kind of pointing that way toward the south. Even here in the south, our sun angle is getting really low. It's amazing how much shade we have in the backyard early in the day, late in the day. The sun angle, of course, as we get toward the first day of winter, which is coming up the third week of December, it's just getting low. So this is the southern part of my yard, and you can see that the roses are really bending toward that. I'm curious if you notice that in your garden. Nothing you can do about it. It's just happening because of the sun angle getting lower as we're heading toward the first day of winter, which will be next month. Here's Hot Princess, again, growing plenty well. The blooms just don't look like they did back in, as I say that doesn't look too bad. Overall, most of the blooms aren't as consistent as they were in the spring. Here I was making fun of Hot Princess, but it doesn't look too bad. And what I mean by that is not all of them had as much form as that one does, like they did back in the spring. I'm going to end you with one of the tallest roses. This is Marlin's Day, and for perspective, I'm about 6 feet tall. This is well over my head, and no tricks. I'll stand with the rose itself, put my hand up, and I can't touch the top. It's a pretty tall rose. It looks like it's a little bit over 8.5 or about 8 feet. I'll have to measure it after this. It's the tallest one so far, and it did get pruned down back in the early part of fall, and it had some new shoots that grew up. But by far, these are the tallest ones, and they're the most established. This bed over here, it's only been planted in the last year. That's why it's not quite as tall. If you saw our videos from this past spring, these are the maiden roses, Cajun Moon and Maverick. Got from Steve Singer in the spring of 2020, so this past year. Potted up, middle of the summer, planted them in the ground, and they are becoming established. To show you an example of what will happen a year later, this is Louise Estes. This was planted in spring of 2019. Again, as a maiden rose, it comes, all it is a little bud. Potted up for a couple months. I plant it June, July in the ground. It gets established for the winter, and then voila, it is ready to go. So this was a maiden rose last year, and it's not even the bigger of the two. I'll show you the biggest one in a second, but that's year 2 of the maiden rose, and that's not even a full year on it, just to show you the comparison. Since I'm talking about the maiden roses, I know I see some people on the rose forums have ordered from Steve. This is what it looks like after 2 years. So this is 2 full years, this is the same one. So this is year 2. It's just a little bit bigger bush. This is Louise Estes as well. So that's it in the garden. I'll end with these. I just cannot get over it. Between the dark foliage of Claire Elise and that color, I'm going to try to cut some of these before the cold weather tonight, because if they get frozen, they will not be looking good. So I'll end with that. Post any of your pictures or comments below. I appreciate it. I'll show you what the garden looks like after tonight. Regardless, on our next video, we're going to do a soil test. I know I did a video this past spring on soil testing. If you missed it, we're going to do that coming up. I've got the soil probe. After this video, I'm going to go out to the store to get some boxes to ship them up to Raleigh. NC State does our testing here in North Carolina. I'm going to do that, and I'll do a video on why we soil test, what you get out of it, and why am I doing it in fall? Why not wait until right before planting time in spring? Another thing to look forward to, I've got some roses coming from Palentine Roses. 3 bare roots we'll be getting here the first week of December. We'll do an unpackaging of those, and I've got some soil, some Pro Mix arriving, and that's what I'm going to use to pot them up in early December. So some exciting stuff coming, although this may be the last time you see gorgeous blooms, depending on the freeze tonight. We're going to do some soil testing, and we're going to do some bare root planting in pots here coming up over the next couple weeks, so look for those videos. Everyone stay safe and warm. If you're watching this video from the southeast, east, or northeast part of the United States, it's probably a cold one tonight. But again, most of the country is going to be pretty warm as we head through the last week and a half of November. So once we get by today, it's going to warm up quite nicely, not really feeling like Thanksgiving weather. Everyone take care, and as always, I appreciate the new subscribers.